Welcome. What I'm about to share with you is not hype, it's neuroscience, it's biology. It's the hardwiring of your brain and body designed to adapt, grow, and transform when given the right input. Today's topic, watch this every day and change your life. It is not just a catchphrase. It's a protocol. Because every day your brain is either being programmed by you or for you. And the science is clear. What you watch, what you listen to, what you repeat literally rewires your neural circuitry. So, this isn't motivation for the sake of a dopamine hit. This is about using specific, targeted inputs, words, images, ideas to reshape the way your brain perceives effort, failure, identity, and possibility. And when you do this daily, you shift from passive hope to active neuroplasticity. If you want to change your life, you don't need to wait for the right time, the right feeling, or the right opportunity. You need the right mindset ritual, the right mental training, and repetition daily. That's how transformation becomes inevitable. Your brain is not a fixed machine. It is a dynamic, adaptable system that changes based on what you repeatedly think about, focus on, and do. This is the foundation of neuroplasticity, one of the most important scientific discoveries in modern neuroscience. Your thoughts, habits, emotions, and actions are not merely reactions to the world around you. They are shaping your neural circuitry in real time. What you focus on, especially with consistency, becomes the dominant framework through which your brain operates. Every time you repeat a behavior or thought pattern, you are reinforcing specific neural pathways. These connections get stronger, more efficient, and more automatic with repetition. Think of your brain like a path through a forest. The more you walk that path, the more defined it becomes. Eventually, it becomes the easiest and most familiar route, and you'll take it without thinking. That's exactly how your identity is formed, not by one-time decisions or random experiences, but by what you do and think every single day. This is why the phrase "watch this every day and change your life" is not just motivational fluff. It's a call to action based on how your nervous system actually works. When you expose your mind to empowering messages, when you deliberately focus on your goals, when you reinforce thoughts of progress and possibility, your brain begins to wire for that reality. Neurons that fire together wire together. This is not just metaphorical, it is measurable. In studies of learning, rehabilitation, athletic training, and psychological growth, the repeated activation of specific mental or physical patterns leads to lasting structural changes in the brain. Watching something empowering every day isn't just a motivational boost, it becomes a neural training ground. And what you're really training is not just positivity, but perception. Because perception drives behavior. If you consistently perceive yourself as someone with potential, someone capable of change, someone with a clear direction, your actions begin to reflect that. But if your daily input consists of doubt, distraction, or disempowerment, then your neural circuitry will favor those routes instead. The truth is, we live in a world that is constantly programming us. Social media, advertising, news cycles, negative conversations, all of it enters through your senses and has an effect. The brain does not have a filter that says only absorb what is helpful. It encodes what is repeated and emotionally charged. So, if you're not consciously choosing what you allow into your mind every day, then you're leaving your neural shaping to chance. Watching something every day that reminds you of who you want to be is a way of reclaiming that power. It's a form of mental nutrition. Just like your body becomes what you eat, your brain becomes what you consume and repeat. And the process is not passive. When you watch something empowering, if you do it with focus, emotional engagement, and consistency, you're not just absorbing information. You're literally changing the structure and function of your brain. This is especially true in the early part of the day. When you wake up, your brain is in a more suggestible state, with brainwave patterns that are ideal for learning and encoding new beliefs. Starting your day with intentional input, motivational videos, guided affirmations, focused visualization can shape the rest of your neurochemical and psychological state for the day. It sets the tone for how your brain filters experience. If the first thing your brain receives each day is doubt, fear, comparison, or confusion, that will color everything you see. But if the first thing it receives is clarity, purpose, and belief, then it's those neural networks that get activated and strengthened. Your identity begins to take shape through those pathways. Who you are is not a fixed label, it's a pattern of thoughts, actions, and emotions that gets reinforced over time. This also means that change is not a single breakthrough moment. It is a cumulative process of rewiring. One video won't do it, one day won't do it, but repeated exposure combined with attention, emotion, and reflection starts to build new circuitry. The key is consistency. Your brain craves repetition when learning something new. That's how you build new habits, new reflexes, new self-beliefs. Even if it feels artificial at first, even if you don't fully believe the message, the act of focusing on it repeatedly begins to embed it. The brain learns through frequency, not just intensity. Watching empowering content every day acts as a form of cognitive rehearsal. It's like weightlifting for your mind. Each repetition builds strength. Each viewing adds clarity. And slowly, the old neural pathways of doubt and inertia are replaced with newer, stronger ones that support confidence, motivation, and directed action. This is not about wishful thinking, it's about taking conscious control of what you allow to shape your brain every day. Motivation is often misunderstood as something you need to feel before taking action, but in reality, the biology of motivation tells a different story. Motivation is not a prerequisite for action, it is a result of it. This understanding changes everything. When you take a step toward a goal, even a small one, your brain releases dopamine, a powerful neuromodulator associated with reward, drive, and learning. But contrary to popular belief, dopamine is not only released when you achieve something, it is released in the pursuit. The process of moving towards something meaningful, of making progress, even imperfectly, is what drives the internal chemistry that we associate with motivation. The pursuit itself is rewarding. This is why waiting to feel motivated before you act is a losing strategy. The action must come first. The feeling will follow. This neurological feedback loop means that the simple act of starting, of initiating movement or decision-making, is the trigger that sets off the chemical chain reaction in your brain. And this loop gets stronger with repetition. The more often you take action despite resistance, the more you teach your brain that action leads to reward. Over time, this creates a powerful habit. Action becomes automatic and motivation becomes a byproduct. You stop needing to psych yourself up because your nervous system begins to associate effort with satisfaction. This is how you override inertia. You stop waiting and you start doing, knowing that the neurochemistry will catch up. The first step, the first move, is the signal to your brain that something important is happening, and that signal wakes up the systems of alertness, attention, and energy. This understanding also helps to explain why people who appear highly motivated are usually the ones who are most consistent in their actions. They've built the loop. They've experienced the chemical reward of pursuit enough times that their brain now craves the process. Not because it's always enjoyable in the moment, but because it has become associated with meaning and progress. This is the principle of reward prediction error. When you set a goal and move toward it, your brain begins to predict a reward. If the reward seems close, dopamine increases. If the reward is further away, but meaningful, dopamine still flows because the brain values direction. Even if the goal is far off, your biology rewards the fact that you're moving. This is also why breaking goals into small, actionable steps is so effective. Each step is an opportunity for a dopamine hit. Each small win teaches your brain that progress is possible. And when you feel progress, you get energy. You get clarity. You get that internal fire we call motivation. It's not magic, it's neurochemistry. And it's trainable. You can build a brain that rewards effort, that finds drive in the process, that becomes less focused on the outcome and more addicted to the act of showing up and moving forward. This is a fundamental shift in how you relate to work, to goals, to life itself. You are no longer the victim of fluctuating emotions. You are the architect of your momentum. When you begin to understand this loop, you stop being controlled by feelings of resistance, procrastination, or fatigue. Those feelings may still arise, but they no longer determine your behavior. Because now you have a protocol: take action first. Let the chemistry follow. And not just any action, aligned action. Even a small movement in the direction of your goal is enough to activate the system. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be complete. It just has to begin. That beginning is the neurological lever. It flips the switch. The brain, sensing progress, turns on the systems of focus, attention, and forward motion. And what's more powerful is that this loop can become self-reinforcing. The more you use action to create motivation, the more you train your identity around being someone who takes action. Your sense of self begins to shift. You stop identifying as someone who needs external motivation to move. You become the kind of person who moves regardless of feeling. And because you move, you feel better. This is the virtuous cycle. Over time, the neural circuitry that once favored procrastination and doubt gets weakened, and the circuits that favor action and confidence get stronger. You're not forcing motivation, you're building it through the structure of your behavior. This also gives you control in difficult times. On the days when everything feels heavy, when you're tired, uninspired, overwhelmed, you know exactly what to do. You don't need a breakthrough. You don't need to wait for clarity. You just need to move, because you've trained your system to reward the process, not just the outcome. You've built the loop where movement generates meaning, where starting creates energy, and where action is the source, not the result of motivation. Stress is one of the most misunderstood concepts in both personal development and neuroscience. Most people see stress as something negative, something to be avoided or eliminated, when in fact, stress is a crucial part of how the brain and body adapt, grow, and become more resilient. The key lies in how you interpret stress, because your interpretation shapes your physiological response. Stress itself is not the enemy, or perception of it is what determines whether it becomes destructive or transformative. The human nervous system is built to respond to challenge. When we are faced with something difficult, something uncertain, or something that demands effort, our brain releases a cascade of chemicals: cortisol, adrenaline, norepinephrine, to activate the body. These chemicals sharpen attention, increase energy availability, and prepare us to perform. This is the stress response, and it's not inherently bad. In fact, it's essential for survival and performance. The long-term effect of stress is determined not by the stressor itself, but by how we frame it. When a person interprets stress as harmful, overwhelming, or evidence of inadequacy, the body's response becomes maladaptive. The brain interprets the situation as a threat rather than a challenge. This activates circuits associated with fear, helplessness, and withdrawal. Over time, this interpretation can lead to burnout, anxiety, or paralysis. But if you interpret the exact same stress response as a sign that your body is preparing you, that your system is ramping up for peak performance, then the biology begins to work in your favor. The stress becomes enhancing, not depleting. Studies show that individuals who reframe their stress by telling themselves that the increased heart rate, faster breathing, and heightened alertness are signs of readiness perform better under pressure and recover faster afterward. This is called the stress is enhancing mindset, and it's not just psychology, it has measurable physiological benefits. Your thoughts influence your biology. The mindset you hold about stress can affect how much cortisol is released, how long it stays in your system, and how quickly your body returns to baseline. Even more compelling is that your beliefs about stress can influence how your cardiovascular system responds. When stress is perceived as a threat, blood vessels constrict. When it's perceived as a challenge, blood vessels remain more relaxed, even while the heart rate increases. This means your heart is working hard, but your system stays in a more balanced, adaptive state. This reframing is powerful because it gives you agency. Instead of seeing stress as something to fear, you begin to see it as a signal, a message that something important is happening. It means you care. It means you're growing. It means your system is being called to a higher level of performance. This shift in perception can change how you face difficulties in all areas of life, whether it's a tough conversation, a high-stakes performance, a personal loss, or an uncertain future. Stress is not a sign that you're failing. It's a sign that you're engaged, that your system is responding to something meaningful. The challenge is to train your mind to interpret that signal correctly. This doesn't mean pretending that everything is fine or ignoring your emotions. It means acknowledging the stress while choosing a lens that empowers you rather than shuts you down. This choice, how you interpret stress, activates different neural circuits. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for planning, perspective, and regulation, becomes more active when you consciously reframe your experience. That gives you access to better decisions, clearer thinking, and emotional control, even under pressure. Training this kind of mindset takes practice. Just like physical strength, mental resilience is built through repetition. The more often you reframe your stress in the moment by reminding yourself that your body is preparing you, that you're stepping into growth, that challenge is part of the path, the more natural that interpretation becomes. Over time, your baseline response to stress changes. What used to trigger panic begins to trigger focus. What once led to avoidance now leads to engagement. This is the core of resilience, not the absence of stress, but the ability to face it, feel it, and choose how to respond. And the more you do this, the more you teach your brain that you are capable of handling difficulty, that you can remain centered under pressure, that you grow through effort, not ease. This creates a powerful feedback loop. Each time you face stress with the mindset of growth and preparation, you reinforce those neural circuits. You teach your nervous system that challenge is not a threat but an invitation. That pressure is not the end of composure, but the beginning of strength. This loop strengthens over time, and your identity begins to shift. You stop seeing yourself as someone who is overwhelmed by difficulty and start seeing yourself as someone who is forged through it. Stress becomes not a wall, but a doorway to the next version of who you are becoming. Visualizing success is not just daydreaming or wishful thinking. It is a practice grounded in neuroscience that activates real circuits in the brain that prepare you to take action. When you vividly imagine yourself completing a task, overcoming a challenge, or achieving a goal, you are engaging many of the same neural pathways that are involved when you actually perform those actions. This is called mental rehearsal, and it's a method that elite athletes, high performers, and special operations personnel have used to increase precision, readiness, and confidence. The motor cortex, premotor areas, and parts of the cerebellum light up during visualization almost identically to when a person physically performs a task. The brain, in many cases, does not distinguish between something imagined and something experienced, at least not in terms of the circuits it activates. That's a profound insight, because it means that consistent visualization can prime your nervous system to act more efficiently and confidently when the real moment arrives. This also has direct implications for your emotional state and physiological readiness. When you visualize success, you're not just seeing an image in your mind, you're simulating an entire experience. Your heart rate can change, your breathing can shift, and your emotional tone can elevate. These physiological changes signal to your body that the event is important, that it's something worth preparing for. This primes the sympathetic nervous system, the system responsible for alertness and mobilization, in a way that can enhance performance, reduce anxiety, and improve reaction time. But the key is in how you visualize. It's not enough to casually think about what you want. Effective visualization involves detail, emotion, and repetition. You must see yourself performing the task through your own eyes, hear the sounds, feel the sensations, and engage with the intensity of success. The more real it feels, the more powerful the imprint on the brain. This process also involves reward pathways, particularly those linked to dopamine. When you visualize achieving something meaningful, your brain often releases small amounts of dopamine, not because you have achieved the result, but because you have activated the system that anticipates and values that result. Dopamine is not simply a pleasure chemical, it is a signal that something worth pursuing is within reach. Visualization activates this anticipatory system, making you more likely to take aligned action, even when it's difficult. In other words, visualization doesn't replace effort, but it fuels it. It creates a neurochemical state that makes action more compelling and more achievable. Furthermore, visualizing success strengthens identity. When you see yourself consistently acting with courage, discipline, or clarity in your mind's eye, your brain begins to encode those patterns as familiar. Repeated visualization helps reduce the psychological distance between where you are and who you want to become. The image of your future self becomes less of a fantasy and more of a template. That template influences your behavior today because the brain is constantly seeking coherence between identity and action. When you vividly imagine yourself behaving at a higher level, your nervous system begins to orient toward that behavior. It's not a guarantee, but it is a primer. It increases the likelihood that you will act in accordance with what you've rehearsed. Visualization also trains emotional regulation. By mentally placing yourself in challenging scenarios and imagining yourself remaining composed, focused, and capable, you prepare your system for future stressors. Your body becomes more familiar with the sensations of pressure, and your mind becomes more practiced at staying grounded. This builds psychological resilience because the moment of challenge, when it arrives in real life, feels less novel and less overwhelming. You've been there before, at least in your mind. That familiarity reduces panic and increases poise. It's a form of desensitization that allows you to perform better under pressure. It's also worth noting that visualization works best when paired with action. The mental rehearsal sets the stage, but physical repetition reinforces it. The combination of imagining the outcome and taking real steps toward it creates a feedback loop where each reinforces the other. Visualization boosts confidence and readiness, which leads to more effective action. That action then creates real results, which reinforce the belief in the vision. Over time, this loop becomes self-sustaining. You build momentum, Not because every step is easy, but because the vision keeps pulling you forward and the results keep pushing you onward. The act of visualization is also a way of communicating with your subconscious. Much of human behavior is driven by unconscious processes, and consistent mental imagery helps to program those deeper layers of the mind. It shapes your automatic responses, your gut instincts, your baseline levels of courage or hesitation. When you continuously see yourself succeeding, pushing through fear, staying focused, or reaching a new level, you are essentially installing that script into the subconscious. The brain begins to respond as if that version of you is already real, and your actions begin to align with that internal programming. Discipline is not about being perfect, nor is it about pushing yourself to exhaustion or constantly living under pressure. Discipline is a system, a structure that allows your brain and body to conserve energy by reducing decision fatigue and creating automaticity. Every time you rely on discipline to act instead of emotion, you strengthen the neural circuits that govern self-regulation, focus, and long-term thinking. This is why people who seem effortlessly consistent in their habits have not found some magical motivation. They have simply trained their nervous system to prefer structure over chaos. The prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for planning, impulse control, and decision-making, becomes more efficient when you remove unnecessary choices from your daily routine. When your brain doesn't have to ask, "Should I do this?" every morning, and instead has a clear directive, it redirects energy toward execution instead of deliberation. Creating that kind of discipline begins with reducing friction. The more effort required to start a behavior, the less likely it is to happen. But if the behavior is cued automatically by time, location, or environment, it becomes easier for your nervous system to fall into rhythm. This is why rituals matter. A morning routine is not just about productivity, it's about stability. When your system wakes up and already knows what to do next, it begins the day with momentum. That momentum is neurological. It increases dopamine, creates a sense of accomplishment, and lowers stress by reducing uncertainty. The less you leave to chance, the more you direct your energy toward what matters. And this is not about being rigid, it's about clarity. Discipline gives your brain fewer options, and that is liberating. Because in a world full of distractions and endless decisions, the ability to act without negotiating with yourself becomes a superpower. But discipline is not something you are born with, it's something you train. And the way to train it is to keep promises to yourself, especially the small ones. When you say you're going to get up at a certain time and you follow through, you're not just waking up, you're building trust with yourself. That trust becomes the foundation of internal stability. The more often you act in alignment with your intentions, the more your identity shifts. You no longer see yourself as someone who hopes to be disciplined, you begin to believe you are disciplined. And the brain follows that belief. Identity is shaped through repetition. It's not the size of the action that matters most, it's the consistency. 1 minute of cold exposure, 1 page of reading, 1 early wake up, each act signals to your system, this is who I am becoming. That signal, repeated daily, begins to override the old identity rooted in inconsistency or avoidance. The beauty of discipline is that it compounds. Each act builds on the last, and eventually your threshold for discomfort changes. What once felt hard now feels normal. That's adaptation, and it's physiological. The more you expose yourself to controlled stress, getting up early, doing the workout, resisting the impulse to scroll, the more your brain and body become efficient at operating under pressure. You don't eliminate resistance, you increase your capacity to act in spite of it. This is where real confidence comes from. Not from the absence of difficulty, but from repeated evidence that you can move through it. Discipline trains your nervous system to interpret discomfort not as danger, but as data, a sign that you're pushing a boundary, expanding your capacity, becoming more. This is also why discipline creates freedom. It may seem paradoxical, but the more disciplined your structure, the more bandwidth you create for creativity, presence, and peace of mind. When your brain is not overloaded with decisions, regrets, or unfinished tasks, it has space. Space to think clearly, space to engage deeply, space to enjoy the moment without guilt. Discipline clears mental clutter, and with it, emotional noise. You stop being pulled by every impulse because you've trained yourself to lead instead of follow. You've created an internal rhythm that doesn't depend on motivation or mood. And on the days when everything feels heavy, when motivation is gone, when stress is high, discipline remains. It's the anchor. You don't have to feel great to stay consistent. You just follow the system you've built. That system, once in place, carries you when your emotions can't. It gives you a lifeline to your values when circumstances try to pull you off track. Discipline is not punishment, it's protection. It protects your energy, your goals, your peace. And over time, it becomes a form of self-respect. You don't need to force it. You just need to repeat it until it becomes who you are. The hard part isn't staying disciplined forever, it's staying disciplined long enough for it to feel natural. Once that switch happens, effort becomes ease and resistance becomes a reminder that you're on the right path. Gratitude is often misunderstood as a passive, feel-good emotion, when in fact it is a powerful tool that can reshape the architecture of your brain, regulate your nervous system, and optimize your perception of the world. Neuroscience has shown that regularly engaging in gratitude practices leads to measurable changes in both the structure and function of the brain, particularly in regions associated with reward, motivation, emotional regulation, and perspective. This means that gratitude is not about pretending everything is perfect. It's about training your mind to focus on what is good, stable, and meaningful, even amidst adversity. When you engage in gratitude, your brain releases a cascade of neurochemicals, dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin, all of which are associated with improved mood, connection, resilience, and motivation. These chemicals don't just make you feel good, they prime your nervous system for trust, effort, and sustained engagement with life. From a neurological standpoint, the brain is a prediction machine, constantly scanning for danger, solving problems, and trying to make sense of the environment. When left untrained, it defaults toward what's wrong. This is the negativity bias, a survival mechanism that once kept humans alive in the wild. But in modern life, this bias can distort your sense of reality, making everything feel like a crisis, even when it's not. Gratitude interrupts this loop. It shifts the brain's focus from scarcity and threat to abundance and safety. When you deliberately notice and name things you're grateful for, whether it's a person, a moment, a lesson, or an opportunity, you activate circuits in the prefrontal cortex that help regulate the amygdala, the brain's fear center. That regulation matters because it lowers reactivity and allows for more thoughtful, grounded responses. In short, gratitude makes you mentally stronger by making your brain less reactive and more responsive. Practicing gratitude also changes the way you experience effort. Instead of seeing challenges as burdens, you begin to see them as opportunities to grow, to serve, to deepen your character. This subtle but powerful shift in perspective reduces resistance and increases resilience. When you are grateful for the chance to try, for the ability to act, for the lessons embedded in setbacks, you remove the emotional friction that often causes people to quit. Gratitude doesn't eliminate discomfort, it gives it meaning. And meaning is what allows you to endure. This is why the most resilient people are often the most grateful, not because they've had easier lives, but because they've trained themselves to extract meaning from pain and purpose from pressure. There's also a social component to gratitude that directly impacts your motivation and mental clarity. When you express gratitude to someone genuinely and specifically, you strengthen the social bonds that make you feel safe and supported. This activates oxytocin, which not only enhances trust and connection, but also reduces cortisol, the primary stress hormone. And when cortisol drops, your executive functions, focus, planning, and decision-making become sharper. Gratitude, then, is not just a solitary practice. It is relational. It improves the quality of your connections, which in turn improves the quality of your internal state. This loop reinforces itself, making you more open, more present, and more capable of both giving and receiving support. Gratitude also increases your sensitivity to progress. Many people feel stuck not because they aren't growing, but because they aren't noticing that growth. The brain adapts to new achievements quickly, a phenomenon known as hedonic adaptation, and unless you train yourself to notice what's improving, you can start to feel like nothing is changing. But when you integrate gratitude into your daily life by reviewing the wins, the progress, the people who helped you, and the inner strength you've developed, you remind your brain that you are, in fact, moving forward. That reminder is not just motivational, it's neurological. It creates a reward signal that tells your system this is worth doing again, which increases your likelihood of staying consistent with positive habits. Importantly, gratitude is not about ignoring reality. It's not toxic positivity. It's about creating a more accurate view of the full picture. Life is never all good or all bad, and the ability to hold both in your awareness at the same time is a sign of emotional maturity. Gratitude is the lens that helps you see both the difficulty and the dignity in your experience. It's not about pretending you're okay when you're not. It's about reminding yourself of what's still working, of what still matters, of what's still possible. And when practiced consistently, it rewires your default emotional state. Your baseline level of anxiety lowers. Your capacity for joy increases. Your ability to be present even in hard moments becomes stronger. This is not spiritual fluff. It's a trainable, testable pattern in the brain and nervous system that leads to greater emotional stability, cognitive flexibility, and long-term well-being.